Hey, what's up? It's me, Lex, back at you with another Pathfinder video. Today I'm going to be covering the research subsystem. The research subsystem is perhaps the largest and most engaging of the subsystems, even though it is not the most versatile in the same way that the Victory Point subsystem is. It allows you to dole out mechanical rewards and information over the course of any kind of situation, whether that be a social situation or a dungeon that the players are moving through. I have 3 examples set up for you that I will demonstrate in the Foundry after we finish our read-through of the rules. The general idea behind the research subsystem is that you utilize it when the PCs are trying to discover important information while challenged by a time limit or other interesting twist. I don't necessarily think that this means that there has to be some kind of limiter, but it is important to ensure that the players aren't just sitting around rolling checks until they pass a threshold with no kind of pressure to continue onwards or chance of failure. As always, you never want that kind of engagement with your players. As the players engage with your research subsystem, they accumulate research points and they gain specific effects or information when they reach set thresholds. They have their own rounds, just like a lot of the subsystems do, that can measure anywhere from 10 or so minutes to a full day. You can also include them in other forms of encounters, whether that just be exploration mode on its own or what have you. And they tend to have consequences or events either as part of making the checks or in between checks to allow the players to kind of split up the subsystem, doing other things, so they're not just rolling die after die. When you're building a research challenge, you have 2 components: the library, which is an area containing the various research checks the PCs need to attempt to learn about the topics. This would be in the example of, say, a dungeon where we're placing points of interest around to pick up lore and eventually some mechanical benefits for the floor of the dungeon. The entire dungeon would be considered the library. And then there is a research stat block, which details the topic being researched and contains information, rewards, and additional complications. This is how you format it, and it is down here as an example, as well as the 3 that I have in my Foundry. This is for quick reference, generally speaking. Throughout any given library, you want to place research checks and allow the party to engage with them to attempt to gain research points. On a critical success on a research check, they'll gain 2. On a success, they'll gain 1. On a critical failure, they will lose 1. Typically, any given research check you place in your library has a limit to how many research points you can get out of it, and then it has various skills that the party are able to utilize to gain information from them. You can also, as with many of the subsystems, encourage role-playing and creative problem-solving by allowing players to utilize skills you did not list in the research points, or even allow completely different solutions to the problem, and I have some examples of that in my Foundry. After reaching the maximum RP value on any given area, they're going to have to move on to a new location and progress through checks over there to be able to gain additional information. They can't just stay in one place. And it also notes, and I will back this up as well, if you want to provide something with just information as a reward for success, it should typically be a very low amount of research points to unlock and be easily accessible from the beginning of a library. And then all of this is talking about different considerations you can put into mind when designing the stat block for a library. Talking about things like ensuring that there are various checks that the party members have access to. So things like maybe if you're researching flying, the books about it are on the top shelf, and so a research check could be done with athletics, getting up onto the top shelf without the aid of a ladder, or even with it. It also mentions that reaching thresholds can change the state of the library. So, for example, in a dusty room, the first threshold might simply be cleaning and organizing the library, which will lower subsequent checks. Or in a haunted library, ghosts might start appearing as their resting place is increasingly disturbed. You can have a lot of fun with this, ensuring that things change, events continue onwards, and I think that this has a lot of potential, in particular in social libraries, for things to happen at certain thresholds that then kick the story into the next step. And it mentions, once again, thinking about constraints that will prevent the PCs from simply researching freely, so that they aren't able to simply sit down in one location or a couple locations and learn everything. And they have an example here, but I will read through my examples. The first demonstration that I have prepared for you is the Giant's Village. Our good champion Tiny is joined by his friend Arak, the centaur investigator, who is going to be hanging around and helping out in this set of adventures to better demonstrate balance with a party of two. The Giant's Village here, for a Game Master overview, has been facing some issues in surrounding towns with the giants heading out and becoming hostile or ceasing their trade. And so the local Pathfinder Lodge has put out a request for adventurers to go and check in on them, find out what's going on, and perhaps help them. What we as Game Masters know is that there is a colony of fungal evildoers at the bottom of the Giant's Well that are poisoning the well water with controlling spores. Across the village, there are several locations that the party are able to research at, and at this point I would let the party know about the ones that they have access to. That would specifically be over here in the farm. They can speak with the farmers to try to learn rumors about the goings-on in the village. In the tavern, they have the ability to talk or listen in with various people or the barkeeper. And I believe, yes, the storehouse can also be searched for information, or perhaps the players would be egged on to go there thinking that that might be the origin of the problem. As far as the thresholds go, at 3 research points accumulated, the players will learn about Giant Village's history, specifically that it was built on top of a haunted bog 100 years ago and was slowly tamed into a more temperate environment. So we're going to quickly get our characters, and I will not be mechanically satisfying the requirements for the chases or the researches, because that would make this video a lot longer than it already is. But Tiny is going to go speak with the farmers, and Arak is going to go and speak with the tavern residents. Tiny comes up on the farmers here and finds them to be a rowdy bunch. They're unwilling to even speak with him and challenge him to a contest of strength. He must lift a giant cabbage above his head and race one of them across the village in a loop. This would be its own chase encounter, a competitive chase encounter where the giant and Tiny would each be rolling individually, and whoever completed the course first would succeed. In this case, we're going to say that Tiny challenges this farmer, beats him in a race, and is now able to start gaining information. He'll be utilizing his diplomacy to try to talk to them and find out what they knew. Meanwhile, over here, Arik is engaging with the Tavern's folk and notices that the barkeep, or at least it comes to them, that the barkeep might have even more information, being the person speaking with all of the different comes and goingsers in the in the bar. And we'll so move over to the stool here and attempt to make an impression on the barkeep to increase their disposition from indifference, but fails, and instead spends the rest of the day simply talking to some people. After some time passes, they gain even more information. At 6 research points, they'll discover that the bog wasn't actually haunted. It was infested with mind-controlling mushrooms. Learning this information causes the fungi down in the well, due to their kind of subliminal connection with the giants, to send the village's only guard to apprehend the PCs the following night. The guard will fight to the death and emit spores when he dies. And so that won't be coming up in this demonstration, but if the party were to exhaust their options for the day, speaking in the tavern, speaking with the farmers, attempting to search the storehouse, and ultimately not being able to succeed, and they went back to their camp or into one of their one of the homes to stay, although that would be incredibly unlikely. It's very likely that they will be camping outside of the town. Then the guard, solitary guard of the town, would go and attack them at night. But they are instead going to continue to gain information. Arik here is going to continue to speak with the tavern's folk, whereas Tiny has gotten all he can out of the farmers and is going to head over to the storehouse and begin searching it. When Tiny arrives in the storehouse, he finds that it isn't a particularly difficult location to sift through, but because of just how many things are in this giant village's storehouse, it's incredibly hard to find anything. And he resolves to ask Arik later to utilize some magic, specifically the quick sort spell he thinks would be useful here to try and find things, but he digs around and will fail to find anything. As Arik continues, Tiny is eventually going to make his way over to Arik, ask for assistance with the storehouse, and take his place. Tiny is particularly charismatic, so he's going to thrive in this environment, in the tavern, making a good impression on the barkeep and reducing the DCs of all the checks in this tavern by 2 for his future research purposes. As Arik is going to use trick magic item and cast quick sorts, sorting the objects into piles, he's able to then sort through just the books and find some incredibly useful information. In fact, bypassing the 9 research points threshold. He learns that the the party as a whole learns that the village's local hermit, Andolph, is seemingly unaffected by whatever malaise is befalling the settlement. A lot of the giants have been describing pains, headaches, aggression that they struggle with, but Andolph is not. He lives to the north, outside of the village. However, hitting this threshold causes the fungi to immediately send the village's mayor to murder Andolph. If the party does not go to speak with him immediately, he will be dead upon their arrival. Each of the PCs gets a secret DC 20 perception check here to notice the mayor leaving. And so I will roll that for both of them. And these would be secret rolls. Otterk is going to notice, as he's exiting the storehouse here, the mayor heading up north, up the path. And he will very quickly get Tiny, and the two of them will make their way northwards to speak with Andolph. When they arrive, they find that he is friendly and attempts to aid the party in their goals. He tells them that he doesn't know exactly what the malaise is, but they're able to narrow down that the only major differences between him and the rest of the giants in the village is that he maintains his own food and water stockpiles. At this point, the party might be interested in testing the water, and I would describe to them that this option is unlocked for them, analyzing the well water. They're going to choose to do so, attempting to kind of lock down exactly what's going on. As they move in, Otterk is going to point out that in the storehouse he found some specific details about the mind-controlling mushrooms that used to be here, and recommend caution in dealing with the water. And it's a good thing, too, because whenever the party first interacts with the well water, unless they take particular precautions, they're exposed to the mind-controlling spores. That would be a secret DC 20 will save, and would have effects in the combat against the fungi at the end of this research, or at the end of this library encounter, depending on the results of their save. I didn't come up with that since I'm not actually running that encounter, but it's good to note. But regardless, analyzing the well water is a very slow process. It'll take 2 days to yield results, but doesn't need to be attended during that time. The two of them are going to collect some water and go back home for the night to analyze it. They're ambushed during the night by the guard and must fend him off. And they decide to spend the next day out of town, burying him and giving him funeral rites. Tiny insists on it. When they return, they find this special effect has happened here. Every day after the PCs arrive in Giant's Village, the fungi redouble their efforts on controlling the giant population. This manifests as the giants becoming less and less friendly, reducing their attitude towards the party by 1 step every second day, and causing them to attack on sight if this would decrease their attitude below hostile. So now most of the village is unfriendly to them, and the barkeep perhaps is hostile towards Otterk. But regardless, as they bring the water back, they have reached the 15 research point threshold, and have hinged on a discovery about the mind-controlling spores being waterborne and perhaps originating from underneath the village. And it's a good thing, too, because this lines up with them hearing about a fungus descending down into the well. They go to the storehouse and find a very old book detailing the mechanics of the mind-controlling spores. So at this point they would understand exactly what the poison or disease of the spores would do mechanically, and they have the ability to take precautions with the items within the storehouse, which will give them a +4 bonus circumstance or item, depending on what you think is most appropriate to their saves. But as they are taking these precautions, the fungi discover that they've been found out and begin to exert their full force on the village. As the party comes out, they are attacked by the entire village of giants. And they quickly run, not wanting to hurt any more innocents, and leap down the well. As they crash into the water below, they fly straight through and out the other side onto an inverted gravity layer that has been built beneath the village. The giants do not pursue them into the well, and they make combat with the mind-controlling evil mushrooms. That's where we leave the Giants Village story, and we will move on to the second scene. This was a demonstration of mostly social encounters, trying to find something out in a specific location, and the information the party gaining directly leading to changes within that location. Moving on to our second scene here. Tiny and Audic have found themselves in debt in the city of Alkenstar, an immense amount of debt, and their debtors are not friendly people. They need to rob a specific bank for these debtors, or else they will be killed. The unique ability of the Midtown Tavern here as a library is that none of the checks in the Midtown Tavern have a maximum research point value unless otherwise noted, but each check takes an entire day to complete. The options immediately available to the party are that they can attempt to gamble at the gambler's table. They need to win a game of blackjack before they're allowed to sit down, which they can attempt once per day with a 5 gold piece entry fee. But they know as well that the information that they gain from the gambler's table will be incredibly, incredibly useful. They also have the option to speak to the barkeep, who is very informed, but is also incredibly overworked and tired. Their beginning disposition is unfriendly, but the party can use Make an Impression once per day to attempt to improve this with a DC of 20. If the barkeep is indifferent to you, you gain access to the line cooks in the back here. And if the barkeep is friendly, all research point values from research are increased by 1. If the barkeep is helpful, they're increased by 2 instead. And finally, the patrons for the immediately available options. As the most varied source of information in the tavern, they are also the most inconsistent, but with immense potential. Whenever the players succeed on a research roll on the patrons, make a DC 19 flat check. On a success, the party will gain 3 times the amount of research points. On a critical success, they gain 5 times the amount of research points. And finally, as far as the stipulations for the library goes, the party only has 4 days to perform their research, as their debtors won't let them linger. Tiny is going to go ahead and attempt to speak with the barkeep, since he is naturally sociable, and Audic is going to join the gambler's table, taking advantage of his general ability to make things go his way as an investigator. He will fork up the entry fee and succeed at... Actually, more interesting, Audic is going to fail at winning blackjack and will be rejected from the gambler's table. This doesn't take the day for them, but they are instead going to go and attempt to speak with the patrons. Tiny, meanwhile, with his charismatic character options, is going to cause the barkeep to become friendly and gain access to the line cooks in the back. And at this point I would describe to the party that the line cooks are perhaps the most overworked of the tavern's workers, but one of them is particularly well informed as a prior bank employee. The line cooks will begin as hostile, and you can make an impression once per day to attempt to improve that. And then the DCs of their checks increase depending on their attitude. So the DCs are 5 higher while they're hostile, and 5 lower if they're helpful. And I accidentally put plus symbols instead of minus symbols. There we go. Tiny is going to go ahead and introduce himself to the line cooks, causing them to simply become unfriendly before returning back to the barkeep to talk for the day. Arak and Tiny are both going to just spend the rest of the day talking, and that will be their day 1 research. They'll pass the 2 research point threshold, which causes them to learn about the bank's internal layout. This allows them to choose between a front door loud approach or a back door stealth approach, being able to plan out a specific route for each. On day 2, they're going to make their way back into the tavern here. Arak is going to sit down at the gambler's table once more. Tiny is going to go up and speak once again with the barkeep. Unfortunately, Tiny is going to be unable to cause the barkeep to become helpful, but is going to move into the back as well and speak with the line cooks, causing them to become indifferent towards him. He will go and spend the rest of his day talking with the barkeep. Meanwhile, Arak, forking up the gold piece entry fee, is going to win at blackjack this time, and then be able to succeed at gaining information from gambling. All of the research point values, both positive and negative, from the gambler's table are increased by 2. So you get 4 from a critical success, 3 from a success, and lose 3 on a critical failure. They're both going to succeed or critically succeed on this day, advancing them not 1 tier but 2 tiers, so they will bypass the 6 research point threshold here, learning about the bank's security schedule and knowing where to find the vault key, which lowers the number of guards by 2 and means that they will not have to pick the vault lock and will not need to search for the key. The party will still receive the normal amount of XP upon encounter completion. I just wanted to note that because they're still defeating the encounter in some sort of way by reducing the number of guards in this way. And as well, because of the high values of research points that they're able to obtain at the gambling table and being friendly with the barkeep, the party is able to learn about the silent alarm in the vault, allowing them to plan around the 4 construct guards that will activate as soon as they enter. So now they know not to rush things, and they know that they can perhaps choke point the robots at the door to the vault. And then on day 3, Arak is going to actually go and attempt to speak to the patrons today, while Tiny is going to become helpful with the barkeep and become friendly with the line cooks. Tiny is going to attempt to pass the line cook's check for the day and will succeed gaining 5 research points immediately, as opposed to any kind of tier success system. This is more about being able to pass the high checks here. And Tiny actually does this by helping them out with their cooking, utilizing the athletics skill. Meanwhile, Arak is going to speak with some patrons and is going to be unsuccessful. But with Tiny's success and their prior successes, they're actually going to pass the 15 research point threshold, which is the final threshold for this library, learning that their debtors sold them out, intending to cash in on a bounty rather than rely on a successful heist. They can entirely avoid the encounter with the authorities by rescheduling their heist and immediately gain the XP that that encounter would have given. So in this specific case, what was going to happen if they didn't pass that was that they would show up at the bank, they would take out the guards, and then when they opened the vault, they would be beset upon at both sides by the City of Alkenstar's police force and the constructs inside of the vault. Now they can tell their debtors that they are going at a different time, allowing them to bypass the police encounter and automatically gain experience now, as if they had defeated that encounter. They're not too happy about the debtors doing that to them, and will surely, after the heist, be taking the fight to them. So that was the second example that I prepared. This is meant to represent how a library or a research challenge can take place in a specific location with a set explicit time limit, and be referencing a different activity or time or location, and how it can kind of interface as well with an ongoing story. Finally, moving on to the third research scene that I've prepared here. Tiny and Audic have been exploring some ruins just for fun. They quite enjoy the rush that learning about history can bring on, and they came upon legends of a buried temple to the north of Chiliax. They've made their way here and have found it. This library is called the Church of the Jurassi, and the challenge here is the Sleeping God, this lizard that I've placed over here. The lizard is a currently slumbering extreme threat enemy for them with paralyzing venom. And the church is inhabited by several of its followers currently guarding it. If the party leaves the temple for more than a day after they pass the second research point threshold, they will return to find the lizard awake and its worshippers regrouped if they did not stop the traveling guards, navigating the halls as a group and beginning a reconstruction process with which it can bolster its power. The party is unlikely to be able to research at this point without being attacked unless they are particularly competent with stealth, or perhaps they have some illusory walls they can set up. The opening here for them will be striding into the entry hall. It's a simple entry hall lined with descriptive texts about the folly of gods. Knowing Mongi lowers the DCs by 3. So the party is going to simply look around, read the insignias here, and the various texts. I did not note, but they only get the 6 attempts that there are. But they're going to pass both and gain 2 research points, which then allows them to learn that this structure is in fact an old church dedicated to a powerful lizard god. That's what the texts here are describing. They move forwards in the dungeon, defeat some kind of puzzle challenge here, and enter into this room, Insignias and Corpses, which has a set of 6 different tombs. These are the tombs of some of the oldest of Grandmother Spider's worshippers in this temple, and as such, it's hard to make out particulars. They're very aged. If the party specifically asks about the 2 coffins that do not have silhouettes on the top of them, then they're rewarded with an automatic success, because these are made of different craft. They're from a different religion, and that is immediately evident. The party's going to spend some time in here, and between the religious abilities of Tiny and the general knowledge of Arik as an investigator, they are going to discover all of this, that these are worshippers of Grandmother Spider, and that these are of a different religion. They're also going to reach the threshold with 6 research points here, learning that the deity, the powerful lizard referenced in the entry hall, was left in a deep slumber after feasting upon its own succor. This is intended to tease the lizard's paralyzing poison. When the party gains this information, the lizard over here begins to stir from its sleep. The guards positioned outside immediately notice and begin to run down this path towards the exit, and they will encounter the party. They're attempting to contact the modern worshippers of the lizard who live outside the temple a few hours away. The party is likely to encounter them on their way out and gain access to the guards' research opportunity when they do, if they can speak Draconic. I did not actually prepare a map note for the guards' research because I wanted to demonstrate how you can come up with these sorts of things on the fly. So the party will continue to look through here for a bit longer. Maybe they're resting. Tiny's arms are a little hurt from the puzzle back here. It had something to do with lifting some heavy weights. And a group of kobolds are going to run past. Tiny will call out to them in Draconic, asking for them to stop and speak, and they will. I will set the amount of research points that the party can get to the number of them that there are, so 2 research points will be available, and the party can do it with most social skills. At a DC of, since they're level 5, a level-based DC of 20. I'll say these are some fanatically devoted followers, and they're very eager to share, so DC 18, perhaps even 17 for Tiny, if he speaks of being intrigued in religion. They'll succeed at both, gaining 2 more research points, which at this point sums to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The party will continue on their way, and at this point I will remind you that the followers of the lizard have left, and if the party leaves the temple for more than a day and returns, they'll find that the lizard is awake and the worshippers have been brought in from outside. That was the threshold that activated that. Entering this room, they find a scroll on a small pedestal and some lit candles that do not appear to burn down. Arik is going to attempt to read the scroll, but finds that it is entirely blank. They can't figure out what to do with it and try to leave, but the scroll disappears from Arik's hand as he passes this threshold here, and so they double back and decide to inspect it a little closer. Tiny needs to make a religion check investigating the room as he decides to try to find out what's going on, as will Arik, although both of them will take a -4 circumstance penalty because they do not speak Mwangi. As Grandmother Spider was the original deity of this temple, and her primary language is Mwangi, there are several locations where that would be useful to have. But succeeding at that check, the party reveals that the room contains the long-lost remnants of an old scribe boy, like an invisible specter kind of haunting around, not bones left behind. They have the ability to attempt to comfort him with a DC 19 diplomacy check. This also has the -4 circumstance penalty. And if they succeed on that, which I'll give them each an actual attempt at this one. Diplomacy. DC 19 with a -4 would be a 3. I think Tiny is going to be the one that has to do this. That is a 17. Tiny is going to hero point that into a 24 and succeed. Tiny will comfort the boy, and the scroll becomes legible. It details tensions between two religious sects in the church, something about greed envying a god, and the party automatically gains 5 research points, which sets them up to 13. At which point they've passed the 10 research point threshold, learning that the temple was originally devoted to Grandmother Spider, and that some kind of battle took place briefly before becoming the Church of the Jurassi. All research checks can now produce an additional 2 research points with this new context. So the scroll does not have a listed value. They can't look more closely at it to find out more things, but they can go back and reinspect insignias and corpses, as well as the entry hall, gaining another 4 RP, which will increase them to 17, which then passes the 15 research point threshold. The party learns that the Lizard's Church violently overtook Grandmother Spider's worshippers and can raise the 2 Grandmother Spider worshipper corpses in areas, and I did not label the areas, but that would be these 2 over here, adjacent to the holding area for the lizard, to assist in battle against the lizard with a 1-minute prayer. The party is going to continue onwards into this room. Beheaded warriors, the skeletons here, would simply rise up and battle them in silence, but after being defeated, the heads of the 2 war priests of Grandmother Spider, these 2 in the middle, begin to converse in Necril. Fortunately, Auric does speak Necril, and so is able to communicate with them. As the 2 war priests communicate back and forth, they're frustrated that they lost to some Jurassi warriors. Auric will say that they aren't Jurassi warriors, they're simply ruin explorers, and that opens up the ability to use the beheaded warriors research check. The party is able to speak with them to attempt to research for 3 checks before they pass on, and unfortunately, for the sake of storytelling here, they're not going to be able to get any new information. They will move on into the next room here and find a worn throne. This throne is in fact never meant to be sat in, and is instead a representation of the failures of gods. Sitting in it exposes the creature to some kind of hazard or curse. I didn't detail a specific one, but you could toss that in flavorfully. But decreases the DCs of the research checks on this throne by 3 for them, as they understand the message of the throne. The party here is going to succeed a little bit and end up 1 point short of 20 research points for more information, and will have to move on. They know that they can summon this and this corpse as a aid against the lizard, but decide to explore first to the east. And they find this devilish pool. It's a gargoyle imp set on top of a small pool of clean water. While not a living creature, it is used by a particularly powerful imp in hell to broker deals. When the party approaches, it says in true speech, "Vision old and pool you see, bring ancient item to me. In my waters wash it clean, but a part of you will belong to me." Bringing any belongings or remains from the corpses and placing them into the pool reveals a vivid simulacra of the battle for this church that took place long ago, automatically giving the party 4 research points. However, this comes at a cost, and you could detail the devil deal that you want with trade-offs for the party. You can instead attempt to swindle the devilish statue out of some information, though doing so is difficult, and it locks up after the 3rd check, instead only repeating its offer. In this case, though, they are going to be able to swindle it out of a bit of information and finally pass that 20 research point threshold, learning that the lizard appropriated the power of Grandmother Spider. And with a quick prayer to Grandmother Spider, now that they're aware of this, they can turn the venom back upon it when they need it. Both Tiny and Auric become immune to the paralyzed and stunned conditions from the lizard's venom. It would do damage, paralyze, and stun you. And can spend an action concentrating on their turn, once per turn, after they've been exposed to the venom, regardless of the result on their save, to force the lizard to make a save against its own venom with a -4 penalty. So now, armed with that information, the party will make their way back here, summon both of the old warriors of Grandmother Spider to aid them, and then do great battle with the lizard in this alcove below, being able to turn its paralyzing venom back upon itself, and having the support of multiple of Grandmother Spider's old followers means that they're going to be able to easily subdue this threat. This was meant to be a demonstration of how a research system can very easily be used to, instead of being its own setup for something, just integrate a threat further along throughout the dungeon and ensure that the party is gaining specific pieces of information that tell a better story and give a better opportunity for understanding what's going on. If they had simply walked through and ignored all of the research, then they would have simply fought some undead, met some kobolds, and then fought a very tough lizard at the very end, perhaps inspecting and seeing some Grandmother Spider worshipping lines on some of the graves. I hope it's evident in this example how potent a tool this can be in deepening the engagement that your party has with understanding and engaging with the surroundings and becoming more immersed. Overall, I think that the research rules are very, very helpful in a lot of different circumstances. You can have them as basically their own entire encounter. You can use them to supplement a different encounter or entire map or entire setting. I think that it could even be possible to expand the breadth of a research subsystem out to an entire campaign, build up that as the party accomplishes certain tasks, they gain research points towards understanding things about the final boss or the goings-ons in general of a campaign. And in fact, I think that this would be a very useful way to implement this tool if you're not entirely confident in your ability to communicate or your player's ability to engage with the various subtleties. We all understand how difficult theater of the mind and having to run things by speaking can be. In fact, my throat is starting to hurt from speaking for such a long video. But I'm taking nice sips of water throughout. I would highly recommend attempting even a small-scale research subsystem into your next campaign. Try to use it to set something up and ask if your players were more able to engage with it. And as for the particulars on how I would advise one to construct a research system or a library, I'm going to be using the Midtown Tavern as the example here. I would start off first with setting up how many thresholds you want there to be. This is going to depend mainly on how large the context of what you're covering with your library is. For example, for a large dungeon, or even an entire campaign, you might have as many as like 10, 20, somewhere in there, maybe even more research thresholds. But for something like a single encounter that you're planning for, or a single session or two, I would say probably anywhere from 4 to maybe 6 or 7, depending on how much effort you want to put in, is quite good. I would start off with a very low one, somewhere around like 2, 3, maybe 4 points, and have this be the introduction into the information that the party is going to have access to. And as well, maybe include some kind of minor mechanical thing that they can engage with for the rest of the research phase. And then I would actually go right on to the topmost research threshold. And this one should be much harder to get to than any of the prior thresholds. For example, here I start off at 2, I increase by 4, then by 5. This isn't a particularly huge example, but I think that there's an argument to be made that in this example that could go as high as 8, depending on what you're looking for. And keep in mind that these encounters that I exemplified here are designed for 2 characters, so be sure to adjust for your party, their capabilities, the amount of them there are. But for the highest research threshold, I would recommend not only giving players the entirety of the information of the library that they are engaging with, but try to have some kind of twist to it, whether mechanical or literal. So for example, here, everything before the final tier of research is them just setting up for the bank heist. But when they hit that final one, they find out that their debtors are intending to cash them in as a bounty. This kind of flips the whole system on its head and comes as like a big shocking revelation. I think it's important to have that kind of depth in the final tier of the research system, as well as a large mechanical benefit. So for example, here they get to avoid an entire encounter and gain additional XP accordingly. The last threshold should be the one more than anything else that is a reward for high amounts of investment or incredible success. Then I would recommend going to the one directly below it and having that be the end point for the basic information. So, for example, here, that is when you learn everything there is to know about the bank. Or, for example, if I was doing a dungeon where the end point was a lich that the party had to battle, then the sub-ultimate research threshold would be learning a lot about the lich's capabilities, a lot about his lore, basically everything except for the final threshold, which would be finding out the twist about his phylactery. Perhaps that it's actually stored within a living creature, and you need to kill them to destroy the phylactery, something like that. And then just fill out the middle bits, pacing out mechanical changes and lore tidbits as useful. What you want is to have this kind of gradual coming to of information as you cross most of the research thresholds, and then have the final one be a big punch for locking everything in and completing it, being a big reward for the investment that the players have done, both mentally and mechanically. But that's all from me. Leave me a comment down below about what you would like to see next time. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.